welcome back. I'm your host, Alex Melki, and this is Anchorman Canada. Now, tonight I want to talk. I want to talk about something that sort of irked me. I read an article, and it sort of set me down this path. I went down a pigeonhole, down a rabbit hole, all the holes. Maybe not all the holes. I went through a rabbit hole on the subject of millennials. And so basically this article that I read, I'm just going to give you a little heads up here. The article that I read said that millennials are having fewer children. That specifically, 1 out of 5 millennials was holding out on having a kid specifically because of cash. And I read that, and I feel like I read articles all the time about millennials and how we're doing this, or we're doing it, we're killing every industry. But it also got me thinking, you know what, I don't really even know much about millennials in general, the definition. Who are millennials? Who's the person that represents millennials? Why are they such a big deal in Canada, in the world? I don't get it. So, well, let's talk about this. And more importantly, why are we always screwed? I feel like everyone's talking about how millennials are always getting shafted. We're always taking it, and the world is not our friend, and we're inheriting a tarnished planet, right? I think there's a lot of ways in which that's true, but I also think there's a lot of ways in which that's not necessarily true, right? I think maybe there's a silver lining. So let's talk about what a millennial actually is, right? If you were born between 1981 and 1996, you're a millennial. That date range, I swear to God, I went to 20 different websites before I found a consistent number. So I feel like even people that are labeling this thing don't even fully agree. But 1986 to 1991 is sort of the general consensus. You probably either played with Pogs, Pokemon cards, or you watched Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
How can you screw that line up?
You know what? Try saying that 5 times real fast.
Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Sorry, bro.
Yeah, he did it. It's the water that's messing me up. I'm dehydrated. I'm hydrating up. So that's probably who you are. And in terms of why it matters, guess what? There are 7 to 10 million millennials in Canada right now. That's pretty much a third of the population. So that's why it matters. And the reason it matters so much, the reason that the way that millennials are living their lives affects the rest of Canada is because moving forward, they're the ones that are going to start making the biggest decisions in the country. They're going to be the ones with spending power, the ones that are going to navigate the way that money is being spent in society. So what I want to do is I want to pull up some numbers, some information, some factoids that can either highlight the positives and the negatives of what it means to be a millennial in Canada, and also how it affects the rest of the country. Because as I said, you're affected. All right, now let me get back to the story that I was telling you about. Actually, hold up. No, I want to hear from you. Now, before we get started, something you don't want to try. I have the comments on Facebook. But before we do that, I'm going to go straight on Instagram. This is on Narcity's Instagram page. So I'm going to go live with you right now. And I'm going to say, hey guys, how's it going? Anchorman Canada. I'm live right now on Facebook. And I'm asking you, do you think millennials are the most privileged or the least privileged generation that exists right now? Let me know. I want to know. All right, let's post this up real quick here. Let's add a little question section here. Why? And why? So there you go. So that's one thing that millennials are dope at is posting to social media. That would have taken my dad 3 days to figure out. Dad, I love you if you're watching, but this isn't about you. This is about me. Actually, it's kind of about you too. So the article that I read, so that 1 in 5 Canadians are holding out on having kids. And the reason they're doing that is because it costs too much to start a family. A couple of months ago, I landed on this article. So Toys R Us went bankrupt, and they blamed it on the fact that millennials are not having kids. They pretty much said point blank that, you know what, it's not really our fault. They're not coming in here with their toddlers. That's our main demographic, and they're just not having kids. And it sounds like a ridiculous statement to make, but you know what? That's not entirely false. We're just not having kids. BDO Canada is an accounting and advisory firm, and what they do is essentially they collect information about the country for companies, for industries, and they present it to give companies an idea of who they're selling to, who is their demographic, and how can they market to them. And they said that on average, the debt that an average millennial has is $20,000 on average. If you have less than that, you're doing great. If you have more than that, hey, sorry, that's the average. 30% of students are graduating without that debt. That means that 70% of Canadians are graduating from a university or college diploma with debt on them. And that's going to delay every other process in their life, like by a year, by 2 years, by 3 years. What do we have here? This is fertility rate. So, okay, so what I have here is this is the fertility rate in Canada. Another aspect of the reason why people are waiting to have kids as well is projected right here. Women are waiting to have babies later. And I'm not saying it's entirely on them, but I'm saying based on this chart, women are waiting later than they've ever have before in Canada. They're waiting until about 30, 31 to have a baby on average. So it's slowing everything down by 5 to 8 years. When you compare to previous generations, millennials are just taking their time. And it's not just money. That's one aspect of it. So we did that. And the other thing is, go for it.
Yeah, but what do you think that they're waiting so long before having a kid?
Why do I think they're waiting?
Yeah.
Well, I think part of it is the fact that, so I was just going to pull this up, 30% of people with kids, millennial with kids, are saying that they're crippled by the debt. And I think they're having conversations with their friends. And they're saying, you know what, you're planning on having a kid? Let me tell you, it's pretty expensive. And not just, it's expensive to have a kid, but it's expensive in the sense that you have debt to deal with, and you have the fact that it's hard to find a job. It's hard to find a multitude of things. So let's talk about that a little bit, right? I said it's about $20,000 in debt, right, on average. Let's talk about education, because education is such a big part of that debt. In Canada, we have it cheaper than the U.S., that's for sure. That's always the argument. You go to the U.S., you're looking at about $100,000, right? You hear horror stories all the time. Canada, we have it great. I live in Quebec. You know, we have it so cheap. I just found out how expensive it is in Toronto, in Vancouver. It's crazy expensive. We have it so good in Quebec. But it's still such a big deal for a lot of Canadians. So let's talk about the narrative of millennials being lazy. Now, millennials not wanting to contribute to society. We sit all day on our couch. We play video games. We don't give a shit about anything, right? Wrong! Millennials are the most educated generation in Canada's history. 60% of millennials have a post-secondary degree, whether it's college, whether it's university. Per capita, I'm trying to find the word here. There's a good word for this. But compared to the rest of the world, Canada is at the top in terms of people having degrees on average. I didn't know this until today. Tuition cost has gone up by 40% over the past decade, and it's not stopping people from getting that education. Now, this isn't a second-hand education. This is an education degree that means something in the world. Unfortunately, when everyone is getting a degree in Canada, guess what? It's harder to get a job. Why? I didn't get the number of people that are graduating with degrees, but there are approximately 1 million people enrolling in universities every year across Canada. Obviously, some of them are going to be leaving, and you're not going to be in competition with a chemical engineer if you're studying, art history. But the point is the same. There are up to 1 million people, or short under 1 million people, who are actually finishing this program and going on to enter the workforce. Now, there are a couple of things that this results in. I know somebody, I don't know if she's still there, she has a PhD, she's working in retail. Does that make sense to you? Doesn't make sense to me. And I look at somebody like that and I go, okay, well, maybe it's, part of it is on you, right? You have to have the willpower to actually go out and take yourself, carry your bootstraps, and go find the job. But a lot of it also has to do with the fact that the environment is not made for that. When there's so many people with so many degrees, it's hard to get your foot in the door. Another thing is the expectations from your parents, right? And it's sort of instilled in you from a young age, at least our generation was, right? That you can do whatever you want. And I think that the message comes with good intentions, but I think that as you get older, I think you realize that that's not true. But also, B, you have to be a little bit more realistic with what you can and can't do. And, oh man, what was I going to say? Yes. So the issue is that millennials are built on this idea of getting your dream job right out of university, right? You're geared up. You just spent years working your ass off, writing essays. But I remember late nights up till 4 a.m., show up to school the next day, drooling, half asleep to hand in that paper, but you get the degree, right? And then you graduate, you're all excited. And then guess what? There was somebody better. Out of the million other people, there was somebody better than you. And I'm not saying if you don't work hard, you're not going to get. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the competition is massive. And so what happens is you end up in a job, working at a desk where you're not really passionate about your job. And a lot of people are going to say, okay, well, it's it's this short burst of instant gratification, right? They relay it to things like social media. They say, oh, you posted a picture to Instagram, you get the likes, you feel good. Because you're getting the dopamine is firing in your brain, and then you get used to that instant gratification. And that translates to the job market. The truth of the matter is, that's absolutely part of it. We'll talk about the mental health issues that has on millennials. But the truth of the matter is that we're geared up to be 100%. Go. Live your best life. You scroll on Facebook, you see all your friends finally getting their dream job. They write a paragraph about how they achieved their dream. I did it. We've all done it. Or you delete Facebook because you're sick of it. It's 50-50. It's such a thing. And then that affects, mental health. But like I said, we'll get to that. And so I want to know, do you think that businesses should adapt to this new millennial worldview, the way that millennials see how jobs should be? Or do you think that millennials should shut up, shut the fuck up, millennials, and just do the job because that's how it's been forever? That's how your parents did it. That's how your grandparents did it. Well, maybe not. They were probably like cobblers and, they were like fighting knights in the streets of, Yorkshire. But the point is, do you think that tradition or the way the system has worked so far, so we should keep it up? Or do you think that millennials should be accommodated, this new worldview? Let me know in the comments, and we'll pull some up before the end of the show. And you know what? Let's take a quick break. I'm going to pull up the comments, see what we got here, off of Instagram. Oh, sweet Wi-Fi here. So, I have Nikolai saying, depends on the job, some luck and hard work. And that's true. I mean, obviously luck, hard work plays into it. There are people that work hard and will never get that job opportunity. And that's not fair. And look, here's the harsh truth. Life isn't fair. And that's something they won't necessarily teach you. Your parents won't necessarily tell you when they're telling you that you can be anything you want. So just keep that in mind. The world's not super rosy. I don't want to get too negative here, but it's true. Just keep that in your headspace. Studies have shown that they have less money and less sex than the previous generation. Pierce says this. Damn. That's totally true. And I didn't have anything about that in here in terms of relationships, but I was having a conversation with somebody, millennial aged, and we were talking about relationships and how easy it is to not have to deal with having a significant other right there all the time. That it's easy because she's always working, he's off doing something else, and it just works out for them. It's weird. Then you have Tinder and Bumble, and that's a whole other mess of things. You know what I mean? Here, let's see if we can pull up some.
You didn't even need the skills to develop.
No, we literally get blamed for every single thing. This is Nick Coriolis. Hold up here. We literally get blamed for every single thing that goes wrong, most especially the economy. And that's true. And again, part of the conversation is that we're inheriting the economy and the earth, right? The climate of the baby boomers, of the previous generation, while also taking the blame for every little thing that's not working out, right? Oh, the price of avocado toast is going up, and Sears is going out of business. Toys R Us is going out of business.
Goddamn millennials.
Goddamn millennials, So I think it's easy to just blame people, especially, and again, not to shit on the baby boomers whatsoever, but they had the most prosperous moment in recent history. So for them to look at the world and go, oh, these new kids are coming up, the new kids on the block, and they're messing everything up, it's just a correlation. They're saying, we're popping up, this is happening. So we'll get to some more comments in a bit. But, got a hair in my mouth there. Let's talk about buying a house. Because let's say you finally get a job, right? You're doing okay. How are you going to get a house? Are they getting houses? Let's look at this. The average salary of a millennial is $38,000. So I wish I had like a ding, 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 ding. If you're making that or more, you are killing it. If you're making less, I think it hovered between 35 and 40. I averaged it out to 38, but that's the average amount that a salary is for a millennial. Is it more than minimum wage? You bet. You bet your ass it is, which is pretty good. The average cost of living for a couple is about $84,000. And again, this is throwing in a city like Toronto. It's also throwing in a city like Montreal. So you're getting at a bit of a wider array there. And again, just pulling it back, the average debt, $20,000. So these are just numbers to factor in. The narrative for a very long time, and I would say even now, is your parents would tell you, hey, you got to buy a house. Ah, there it is. That's such a good picture. You got to buy a house. Because if you rent, you're throwing your money away. And if you buy a house, it's a good investment. And I don't know enough about property value to tell you what to do. That's probably still true to a degree. But if you can't afford it, what are you going to indebt yourself to get a house? Is that how that's going to work? Here's a real issue, and this is where it starts affecting the baby boomers, and it gets kind of interesting. A couple angles I didn't even think about. So first of all, I spoke about this previously. There's been a 5% drop for millennials buying property now than their parents, their exact age. So when your parents were, let's say, 25, there was 5% more people buying houses then than you guys are now, right? That's number one. How is that affecting? Oh no! Wait, no. We have the chart. Pull this up. This is super interesting.
Okay. Chart.
So this is the chart of global home ownership across the world, right? Canada is way down there. We're not doing good. We're not doing great. Who's that? China and Mexico. My eyesight is not what it used to be. But yeah, there you go. So we're not doing super great in the realm of people buying houses. And how is that going to trickle down and affect the rest of the country and society, right? A couple ways. One, it's affecting the value of the houses. So even the millennials that are buying houses are kind of getting screwed over because with fewer people wanting to buy the house, the value of your property is not going to go as high as it could have been in your parents' generation. When everyone was just like, buy. Now it's more, oh, we buy it. Should we move up to something bigger? It's been 4 or 5 years. Oh, we can't? Oh, all right. So that's an issue. And the only thing that's buffering this is millennials with pocket change to spare right now and immigrants coming in. Once that sort of ends, that period, obviously immigration is never going to, they're still going to come and houses are going to be sold. But at a certain point, the baby boomers are going to want to move out. They're going to need to put their houses up on the market. And who's going to buy it? Well, apparently not that many millennials. And another issue, and this is where it gets very interesting, if you want to move out and you have your kid living in the basement, how are you going to do that? How are you going to, if you're a baby boomer, right? And you planned your whole life, you own your house, you paid off the mortgage, and you're going to sell it off and you're going to save the money and you're going to live in a small apartment with your significant, your wife or your husband, and you're good, right? Guess what? 35% of millennials still live at home. So if you have a 30-year-old son that can't even afford to live on his own, and maybe he's contributing a little bit every month to the rent, that's an issue. And that's going to backfire. I don't want to say that it was, the system is not built for this to happen, right? They didn't plan for it because they didn't expect it to happen. But guess what? It's happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not good. It's affecting parents. And this one is super, super crazy. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, okay, what they do is they pull all this information about financial aspects of society. And they say that not only will millennials never recover in this financial climate, that it's going to be the next generation they're going to be okay, but everyone, that 10 million population of Canada, screwed. They looked at the decrease in wealth by decades, not generation, by decades, right? And anyone born in the 80s so far has the greatest decrease in wealth. So looking at each decade, the amount of money that you're going to make in your lifetime is going to be a certain amount. If you were born in the 80s, that's the greatest decrease in wealth. You're going to make the less.
You want to see the...
Oh, do we have that?
Yeah.
Yes. So there you go. And so that's on average. That is big money. And what I had for this, right. So if you're born in the 70s, this isn't, okay, so what I was going to say is that this isn't a new trend either, right? The fact that each generation is making less than the previous one, this goes back. So if you were born in the 70s, you were making 20% less than what people were making in the 60s. If you were born in the 60s, approximately 10% less than what people were making in the 70s. So it's not a new trend, but it's worse than it's ever been. And then what does the job market look like, right? Because now you're living in a world where it systematically looks like you're getting shat on. We talked about this in the beginning. How are millennials screwed? That's exactly how they're screwed. They're not going to be able to make as much money as previous generations. And it's sort of up to them, or I could say us, because I'm in that group, Cameron, Gabe's in that group. It's up to us to sort of figure it out. And so what does the job market look like for people that are trying to figure it out, and there's no real precedent for this sort of thing? So right off the bat, Statistics Canada says that millennials make up the biggest chunk of the unemployment portion of Canada. And that's kind of crazy. Now,
especially thinking that we have overall average over the world
the most graduates.
Well, that's it.
That's post-secondary.
That's it. So we have the biggest amount of graduates. We have the most educated populace. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we have and they're the ones that are the most unemployed.
Yeah.
So again, the narrative back in the day was that you didn't even have to finish high school. You just walked into a place like Canadian Tire, Air Canada. You probably did it there.
Oh.
You go to Air Canada, you go, "Hi, I'd like a job," and they go, "Well, what size overalls do you wear? Because we only got a medium. You're a medium, you're hired." You know, that was the job process. Now you're graduating, and the competition is insane. I said there's close to 1 million people every year that are signing up for university. So what happens is there's a lot of job hopping, right? And it's not so much the fact that everyone wants the next best thing because they want to feel excited because they're getting bored at work. It's because they don't feel safe. The idea of a safety net at work, that job loyalty, employment loyalty, is not a thing anymore in many, many industries. And I've had this conversation with friends where they debate me on the concept, but I strongly believe it, and I think that this is one of the reasons why this is happening. I'm sure that you have a friend that refers to themselves as an entrepreneur. I swear to God, if I hear one more person say that, I'm going to lose my mind. The reason they call themselves that is because that's exactly what they are. Without these full 9-to-5 jobs, millennials are finding pockets of time to fit themselves in, whether it's building an app, whether it's teaching kids in a foreign country to speak English online, whether it's one of a million things. You kind of have to figure it out on your own. And what that does is it does a couple of things. Number one, creates a lot of stress because there's no consistency in the work that you're doing. You can't say, hey, I have a 9-to-5. You look at people that are millennials that have a 9-to-5 and you almost go, damn, good for you. That's the dream, a 9-to-5. Maybe you get benefits. A lot of them don't have, you know how many millennials don't have benefits? That should have been a stat that I pulled up. Because guaranteed it's not that many. It's all contracts.
What are benefits?
What are benefits? I know, but I want to know, and I want to know how that's going to affect the dental industry, how that's going to affect a lot of medicine, right? Because if you don't have it covered through work, what are you going to do? You know? TD did a poll, and they found that half of millennials are actually taking their vacation time. They're not able to do it, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, maybe they're scared about the workload coming back. I know I've been in that position where there's just so much work to do that if I leave, the stress is just going to be eating me alive the whole time. I'm going to come back, and what are they going to find somebody to replace me over the weekend? Maybe. And the other one is that it's just too damn expensive. They're not able to afford the lifestyle that they need. And again, it's nothing too crazy. All right, I'm talking about a basic living. They're not able to do that and go on vacation. And so what is that doing to their mental health? Oh my God.
Oh man.
It's bad. Psychology Today says millennials are reporting the highest levels of clinical anxiety, stress, and depression than any other generation before it. Now, I want you to take this with a bit of a grain of salt, and I'm saying this just because this isn't something that was looked at previously. I feel like back in the day, they might have just said, oh, here, sleep it off. You know what I mean? Or, oh, you're sick. Have a drink of scotch, because that's how they dealt with stuff. We're just more aware of the mind and how it affects your health and stuff. I really think that that's a big issue, a big factor in that statement. But it's important to also understand that. Now, millennials are seen as the most creative generation because we were allowed to be, right? As I said in the beginning, we were encouraged to try things that other people weren't able to do. You wanted to try stand-up comedy? You want to be an artist? You want to do art history? Gender studies? Go for it. Because it's your passion. The problem is there's so many people that are graduating with degrees that aren't translating into something in the job market, and then they're getting screwed over. And is it a cyclical thing that's happening? Maybe. Is it a bubble? Who's to say? I think a lot of it has to do as well with the individual, right? You have to have the willpower to drive you through. Abacus Data, what they do is they have focus groups, they do surveys, and again, they're just collecting information on the populace. And what they found is that over 60% of adults under 30 have anxiety. They're freaking out. And again, I think it's helpful that it's something that we can talk about more today, but this just ties into the fact that millennials are trying to deal with all the things we just mentioned, right? They're at a huge disadvantage financially on average. And they're starting to realize, I can't do this. You know how many times I'm scrolling on Instagram and I see memes about how, when people, you're smiling, but deep down you have nothing together. Like, it's almost to the point where it's not funny anymore. It's actually kind of sad. Like, I can laugh at it because it's relatable content, and I think that a lot of millennials can too. But when you're looking at something and you're deep down, you're like, oh, this isn't a joke.
No,
This is
it's
like this is for real. Like, 50% of millennials say that they've dealt with depression.
Mm-hmm.
That's heavy, man.
Yeah.
Like, the suicide rate has, I think it's increased by 3 times what it was in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
we have the highest rate of suicides.
we have the highest rate.
Millennials.
Millennials have the highest rate of suicide.
Yeah.
That's not great, right? Now, I feel like we got dark with it, and it looks like being a millennial is the worst thing that you could possibly be. And here, before we get to the closing remarks here, I just want to pull up the comments one last time. Let's see what we got here.
That's not the worst thing.
It's not the worst thing. There are way worse things. Running out of food. Depends on their... No, I think we did that one. We live in the best time and in the best place in history. Max says this. And you know what? That's a perfect segue to what I was going to say. That is a silver lining. We really do. I feel like in the same way that the news always feels like it's doom and gloom and everything is the worst that it's ever been, it's actually not. Now, first of all, as I said in the beginning, we are the most educated generation in Canada's history, right? We're smart, and that means a few things just in terms of the values that we have. We're trying to make the world a better place, even though it doesn't seem like that on the day-to-day because you're hearing the loudest things. We're trying, right? Female millennials specifically, on average, are making more money now than they ever have before in Canadian history. And if you don't think that's good, you're out of your mind. That's huge. That's huge. We're also smoking less and we're drinking less, which is, we don't have projections now. I don't think scientists can do this, but we're probably going to live longer than our parents did. And that's dope. And guess what? You know what else is good? We're not having kids. You know how I said that at the beginning? That we're not having kids and that's sort of an issue? Well, guess what? The fact that we're actually thinking about this and we're making informed decisions and not just willy-nilly popping our willy in a nilly. That needs to be put on a t-shirt.
Popping a willy.
That, I think, is a good indication that, you know what, it's not the end of the world. And we're dealing with things, I think, a lot better than people give us credit for. And I think that there's still hope for millennials. The next generation, though, I don't even get it. They're not even on Facebook anymore. They're doing Snapchats and Musical.lys, and them I don't get. But millennials, we're good, right? Baby boomers, you guys are old. Millennials, every generation has said that. Canada, thank you so much for listening to me tonight. Thank you for sitting with me as I drink my water and I spout knowledge at you. We're going to have another show for you tomorrow night, 7 p.m., Anchorman Canada. Like on Facebook. Share it if you can. Would be great if you liked it. If you hated it, share it even more. Share it on everybody's wall if you hated it. And subscribe on YouTube. And I will see you tomorrow night. Take it easy.